Well, good morning, everybody. First of all, I just want to say thanks to Matt for covering for me yesterday while I was out. And I really appreciate him covering some of that longer-term, in-depth stuff, which we're going to certainly fill in for the rest of this week with more information on that. So I've got some new long-range analysis I want to talk to you about tomorrow, specifically with respect to maybe longer-term drought issues that I think will be quite important for broad sections of the United States. In the near term, that's exactly what we're dealing with. This particular image was one I put in my report back on Monday. So this is already several days old, but what's amazing about it is how stuck this pattern currently is. So Monday morning, fired this off, and this is the newest forecast today. Now notice I don't have the drawings over the top of it because this was just an image in a report, but you can still see nearly the same thing. We've got low pressure that is developing in the Bering Sea. The lows are coming out into the Gulf of Alaska. They're targeting, parts of British Columbia, but large ridges of high pressure just keep reforming in this area, giving us a very volatile temperature pattern across the northern tier of the United States. If lows do get into the U.S., they clip the northwest, but really they form over this ridge and then dive into parts of New England, which we're going to talk more about here in just a few moments. We still see the same thing. The Bermuda High is way over toward Africa. The flow is going around it like this. That would be Kirk's path. And then we have this potential for some tropical development here, which we've been questioning all along because the environment ahead of this is just not as conducive as it was for Helene, thank goodness. But the potential for very heavy rain across southern Florida is a main part of this forecast. So the big questions we just continue to ask is, when does this break down and when does this change? And right now, I think we may be looking at another at least 2 weeks of dealing with this before something different starts to show up in the forecast. So that gets us all the way out there to the 17th of October. Now, this morning's all hazards weather map really shows us what we're getting out of the northern edge of that, which is this volatile temperature pattern. So you can see we have the frost advisories here, and here. We have the freeze warnings in parts of western North Dakota, and then all of this is related to high winds. The excessive heat is tucked away where the base of that ridge lives, which is in the southwestern United States, getting up to the Central Valley of California. And with the major drop-off in temperatures that's moving eastward across the country, we're getting some fogs here. Pretty large area fog in the Smoky Mountains, and then up here toward this part of the the mountain chain as it extends into New England here. Still air quality issues down in a couple of places in Texas, just to kind of round out our view here of what's going on in terms of our all hazards weather map. Okay, so where we get with some satellite data really kind of shows you where the pattern is. So we just got a new image in there. So sun's trying to rise here in the Midwestern United States, but let's come back to yesterday. All the flow is here. I mean, it's just a zonal bit of jet stream flow, everything moving west to east, and some of the wildfire smoke that you can see from the fires that some were in Oregon. We had some in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. That wildfire smoke just blew right across the Midwest here. And it was interesting. Last night as I was flying home from Fargo, we were delayed about 3 hours leaving, and then we had to sit on the tarmac at O'Hare for another 45 minutes. So I got to look at some of this. I should have taken some pictures for you because you could see this layer of smoke deep in the atmosphere. It was just giving this brilliant sunset as we were flying in last night. But that's what's going on. We have incredibly strong winds in this area. So speaking of those winds, I just want to show you kind of a mile up in the atmosphere what's going on. And it comes back to that same story. This is kind of our point of origin. This is where our low pressure systems dig. And then they're having to go over some sort of big ridge in the west. There's kind of a reflection trough. I keep calling it that. It's the length of what we call a Rossby wave. So if we develop lows here, there will be others that come off the top of the ridge here. There'll be more that go into Europe, but that's their spacing. It's determined by the Rossby wavelength. That's part of the spacing issue, at least. You can see what's going on in the low levels of the atmosphere here coming into Texas, but the problem is that the source of this flow is not the Gulf of Mexico. It's coming off of the high desert of the southwest and into Mexico, so this has not got any moisture in it to kick off any systems. It is neat to notice that flow is coming through the Tejano Pass and actually spun up a little tropical system here, which I'll show you again in a few moments. But I'd like to slide over to where kind of the thing that's really missing in the pattern is, and it's the Bermuda High. It's way over here. So just for reference, Bermuda is there. And we typically find the Bermuda High somewhere between, these island chains. So Bermuda to the Azores to the Cape Verde Islands. And instead, it's pretty far to the east right now. So we've got tropical systems kind of orbiting around it. You can see 1, 2, and then this is kind of what's left of Helene. part of it at least, part of Helene, just sitting out here and spinning. A much deeper low that's way into the North Atlantic. And all of this just kind of cascades around the Bermuda High and ends up somewhere over Europe after going through the British Isles as an example, which is making things quite stormy there as well. So that Bermuda High displacement is a major part of this pattern and why it's so dry in the midsection of the country. It's allowing for larger areas of high pressure to build in. And this isn't there to displace it with moisture and flow out of the south, as an example. So what we're stuck with is a pattern that just doesn't have the ingredients to make a lot of rainfall. So let's go and have a look at the tropics, though. So over the next few days, we have Leslie, newest named system, and Kirk continue to orbit around the broader area of high pressure. The National Hurricane Center has now downgraded the risk of this tropical system in the Gulf of Mexico to 30%, and we have 11 that snuck through the Tejano Pass right in through here and is developed. So that's just kind of neat to see all that come together. The model forecasts on the position of what could be a tropical low pressure system push this towards southern Florida. It'll be, if we just kind of let this reset, we're looking at here Monday of next week. That's when I think this is going to be moving through, but it does have the potential for producing some stronger winds. Right now, we don't even think it's going to get up to hurricane strength. At best, it's probably going to be a tropical storm, but maybe not even achieve that. But it's the moisture. It's going to produce a lot of very heavy rain across southern parts of Florida. So we just step back again and say, all right, what's controlling this and what do you need to see break down? Well, 2 videos ago, I told you what has to happen. This trough, which is living here, beginning life here and then establishing itself into the Gulf of Alaska, has got to move all the way into the southwestern United States. When that happens, all of this resets. The Bermuda High will regain position over here. These troughs will begin to fade, open, and move, and it'll just bust this whole stuck pattern up. And currently the thinking is that may happen about 12 to 15 days from now. At least it may start to happen. So what you notice is that for most of the next 15 days, which this is a 15-day composite map, you end up getting flow that does something like this. And it seems to be just tucked away in that pattern for a while, and that's what's given the very dry forecast for the midsection of the United States, the volatile temperature pattern across the northern tier of the U.S., the potential for some development of low pressure just off the northeast coast. And it's what's going to keep this would-be tropical system away from moving into the U.S. This big ridge of high pressure is just going to block it. That's why it's going toward Florida rather than over toward Texas or Louisiana. So we think all that through when we get to the other threat with this pattern. And the problem I'm concerned about is when you look at what's coming across the top of this, there we go, we're looking at some strong winds. When I say top, I guess I should say the northern tier of the U.S. Just playing through Saturday evening, we're going to watch our next frontal boundary sneak through. We've been talking about it now for a couple of weeks. It's got a lot of dry air in it. It's going to be bringing in some colder air. But you're going to start to see winds here in the Great Basin, coming off of the Sierra Nevada, through this part of Oregon, Idaho, and then off of the Rocky Mountains here. That'll be downslope winds gusting 50, 60, 70 miles an hour. And then we're going to watch from southern Saskatchewan into parts of Montana and the Dakotas, parts of Manitoba here, just widespread winds that could be gusting 50, maybe over 50 miles an hour as this frontal boundary sneaks through and just brings in another dose of those strong winds. Where you're not getting the wind is down here. Much of, from the Carolinas to the Mid-South back to Texas, most of Texas, especially the eastern half, I don't have much of a wind story for you at all. Very calm conditions. And the reason for that is the upper level flow is doing this. The surface high pressure is going to try to sit here. And that's where we're going to get our driest conditions out of this pattern. So I just want you to be aware of the strong wind scenario that is continuing to unfold across the northern tier of the United States, beginning in the western mountains, but stretching across the northern tier of the United States as this next front advances. From there, let's just go have a look at total precip. I don't need to show you 7 different models. I just need to show you one because they all look the same. Outside of this system that may develop here, I'll show you the timing of that in a few moments, and then the tropical system that could get into Florida. And again, the risk here is for several inches of rain possible in southern Florida. You've got maybe a small chance of rainfall just south of the Quad Cities here. And then maybe around the Puget Sound area. We're just clipping the southern edge of the flow coming into British Columbia. That's it. I mean, that's really all that we're talking about in terms of precipitation. So if you want to know who's on the wetter side of things, this is the chance of getting an inch. If we step this up to 2 inches, but we got a new model run. Yeah, let's go back to the old model run there real quick. This is the 0Z. 6Z doesn't go out this far. That's why we switched back to it, in case you didn't know. That's the chance of getting 2 inches. And here's 4. We're just kind of looking for the risk of that flooding in Florida here. And there's a better than 50% chance of 4 inches of rain as this tropical pulse comes toward this area. But if I show you who's under half an inch for the next 10 days, that's a lot of area where there's a better than 90% chance of staying under a half inch in total precipitation. So let's go have a look at the European model run. And this is the 0Z precipitation type and intensity run. As I play this forward, this is getting through Friday. Maybe Thursday night to Friday morning, that's when we have the chance of rain in this area. But outside of that, possibly some storms along the Gulf Coast. A low comes into British Columbia, so it could clip parts of the Pacific Northwest. See right there? Maybe adding a little bit of snow to the Cascades, some into the coastal parts of Washington and Oregon, but this is still not a big precipitation maker. So this is where we could have our best chances for storms this, late this week into the weekend along the Gulf Coast. We're going to watch that low roll through parts of the Canadian Prairie. It'll be behind this front that we get a big drop in temperatures, and we get the very strong winds. So actually be strong winds out of the south ahead of it, and then out of the west, northwest behind it. What time is this? This is midday on Saturday is what we're looking at here. So that's when the strong winds are coming into this area. That low, though, goes into Ontario. And what I'm interested in seeing is if this is going to be able to produce a decent amount of precip. And what I'm talking about here is maybe 1/4 of an inch to 1/3 of an inch. This is overnight on Saturday night into early Sunday morning. And then that low is the one I'm watching that could curl up into the northeast. Now this is next Monday, Tuesday. I'm rocking back and forth over Monday and Tuesday. And that's when we expect to get the really heavy rains moving into Florida. And some of the models throughout this week have put this low closer to the northeast rather than, in this case, way up here around the Hudson Bay. And that's just reflective of how big the newest model forecasts are putting in that trough. So I'll just keep playing. This is out there, next Thursday, Friday, maybe next Friday, we are watching a system get close to the western United States. That could begin the breakdown of the pattern, but I'm not putting too much hope in this overall pattern. So that's just a quick run through the European model, just showing you some of the features we're keeping an eye on right now. But for most of the country, high pressure dominates. What you'll notice in this, though, is that when you get out there into the week 2 forecast, the new CPC update went with above average here. Notice we're back to near normal in the European, wetter than average along the West Coast in the artificial intelligence, and near normal in the GFS. And I think what's going on here is we're finally kind of breaking down this pattern we've been stuck in. You ready? So you'll just notice lows, where do they go? Right over into Canada. They then dive here. The next one forms. I mean, this is the pattern we've been talking about for weeks now, it feels like. What's happening, though, I'm way out there. I'm already October 12th, 13th, 14th. You'll notice around the 13th and 14th, something a bit different happened. The ridge gets almost broken off. There's almost a wave break in the ridge, and that may allow for some tropical system to sneak in here. So just to be clear, this is mid-month. This is October 15th, that Tuesday. Not the next one, but the one following. And that might be the time frame where this thing starts to shift. I mean, to really get a trough in here, to shrink up this ridge, return the Bermuda high, that's it. So until then, unfortunately, nearly every one of my forecast videos will start off with the same kind of thought process until we can actually see if the pattern will in fact break down. But I just want to let you know something. We are out here, meteorology, we jokingly call this la-la land, right? It's 2 weeks out in the forecast. So to see this evolve is what we're going to have to pay attention to over the next little bit. My biggest issue is this. With that very dry forecast, how much drier is it going to get in areas that have not measured much precipitation in the last 30 days? This is my 30-day total accumulated precipitation map as a percent of normal. And there are large sections of the country that have measured nothing in the last 30 days. Now, again, most of what's down here in this quadrant of the U.S., the southeast, the whole area of the southeast, up to the Ohio River Valley, this has been due to 3 tropical systems, right? We'll do those again real quick. We had Francine, potential tropical cyclone 8, and then Helene. And we're still, the cleanup effort from Helene is going to take months, if not years, for certain areas that were destroyed by that hurricane. But over the last 14 days, Just 2 weeks, you can see very, very expansive areas that have measured nothing in terms of precip, and the soil moisture continues to drop off. So in my forecast video tomorrow, I've been preparing something for you that's a super long range outlook. I'm going to take you all the way out into next year, like growing season of next year. And I'm not doing this to raise any hype. I'm just doing this to say what ifs. Matt made a good point. It's something that we do all the time. Like, are we checking off boxes that increase the risk of something else happening that could really deviate from what we think might happen? And I want to discuss that with you tomorrow. And a lot of it's going to be based on soil moisture values and how they evolve before things freeze up in this area this winter. Speaking of freezing things up, this is the frost outlook for the next 7 days. All right, everywhere in gray. If we take a look at those minimum temperatures, here's this morning, very cold in the northwest, cold in the northern tier of the U.S. The cooler air giving us that fog right in through here. But this is Friday morning's lows. There's the next kind of cool push in through this area. Saturday morning, look at the change in the temperatures here. Back up to overnight lows in the 50s and 60s. We then get into Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, Wednesday. That's all of the low temperatures we're expecting over the next week. This is the maximum temperatures, so daily highs. So, the changeover that's happening in the western high plains here has been just incredible. We've seen in the span of 2 to 3 days over 70 degrees of temperature swing. We've gone from frosts and then seen temperatures in the upper 90s. Well, we're just continuing that. There's Friday's highs, Saturday's highs, Sunday, Monday. Look at the heat coming back into that area again. Tuesday, it'll be hot here, cooler, drier, fall-like weather going into the eastern United States. Let's take it all the way out to Wednesday next week. Bigger picture, these maps have largely stayed the same all this week in my forecast videos. And it's the reality that the pattern, it just keeps doing this. There's the ridge, troughs can form in this area. That's it. So that gets us out there to the middle of the month. Okay, beyond this, to help build this narrative of what I think we're going to talk about in tomorrow's video, a lot of it is going to be looking at seasonal factors. Okay, so La Nina as a primary example and soil moisture. We really only have, when you look way, way out, long range, our best predictors are ocean temperatures, so La Nina, and soil temperatures. In the subseasonal, that's why we look at these maps. This is the next 15 days looking at where the best rising motion is in the atmosphere. And it's here. It's somewhere over the Indian Ocean, like phase 2 of the MJO. And I bring that up because phase 2 of the MJO in October, when there is a La Nina, guess what it favors? Ridging in this area, troughs that form here, that come through, that go over the top, down. And you just see the daisy chain of this keep going. So there's a lot about where the MJO is that's combining with the West Pacific Oscillation, which we've been talking about for weeks, and what's going on with La Nina to keep promoting, this pattern in the near term. But if this breaks down, you'll get a whole different regime, and it could do that after mid-month. But I don't know. I'm very skeptical on it making a big change. So a lot about tomorrow is going to be this. What is going on with our ocean temperatures? The warmth here, the warmth there, that's the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. We need to talk about the potential for the PMM, the Pacific Meridional Mode, to shift around, and what's going on with La Nina. And we just need to know how La Nina is going to continue to evolve as we go forward. So right now, I do expect there to be a good push of trade winds over the next few weeks, at least the next 2 weeks here, suggesting that we could get out there and start to see more of a La Nina signal. But remember, La Nina signals are overall a drier signal for the early part of fall. And just to kind of add to all of this, let's give a North American view 30-day outlook. That's the month of October and even into November. You start to see a little bit of a shift there, but I think most of October is drier. But as I mentioned, La Ninas tend to flip the November pattern from whatever October was. So could we be looking at something different in November? Sure, I really think we could, but that would all be predicated on La Nina doing its normal thing. So what is La Nina up to? Well, the latest CFSV2 forecast has La Nina continuing to build through January. And what I want to talk to you about tomorrow is what happens in those years following La Nina winters. We just need to think this through and combine it with the risk factors we have right now with the dry soil moisture in the midsection of the United States. So I want to give that some thought today and put it for you in a video tomorrow. But to kind of wrap this up, I want to show you one last graphic to kind of complement what Matt was showing yesterday. Why do the winter forecasts all look the way they do? Well, a few weeks ago, I made this graphic and showed it to you. I just want to bring it back up again. We look back at all of our La Niñas since 1979, and we just say, what did they tend to look like? Well, I tried to label this so you could see it. And just remember something. While this is what we tend to get, just pause the video and have a closer look if you want. But while this is what we tend to get, sub-seasonal factors at times can really dominate. And that is not reflected in this at all. So we just have to understand that the overall pattern may try to get to this, but we could sometimes have sub-seasonal factors that could completely outdo anything La Niña is trying to do. So that's why we do these videos every day, to watch for those sub-seasonal things. Lastly, you noticed earlier in the week, the models went very wet for parts of Brazil. And so the newest 10-day forecast from the European model, the newest 10-day forecast from the GFS are finally starting to show monsoonal moisture coming in. I can just go back and forth and you can see that now as we approach the middle part of this month, we're getting rain in places. We're overcoming the deficits in moisture that are here. And as a result, we are expecting to see things shift toward a much more quicker planting pace on these precipitation forecasts. And the mid-October to mid-November forecast, which was initiated wet, went even wetter. And so we'll have to just pay attention to see if this is really how things are going to play out with above average precipitation, what that could mean for the start of their growing season. But I think it's going to mean a pretty rapid onset of planting here in the next 10 days. So remember, about 80% of the soybean crop is planted for like Mato Grosso in month of October. So these wet conditions will help increase the quality of that seed bed and with respect to the water and the field preparation, it'll get going. So I'm going to stop it there and look forward to talking again tomorrow for that long range forecast. Until then, you have a good one. Thanks.